Recording again as well. Okay, so tonight I wanted to take a brief pause from our series on the east wind and the four winds. We completed our look at all of the instances that mention the east wind in scriptures, and then we're going to press ahead with the four winds when we resume. But I wanted to get back to another review of some of the prophetic developments in the news since our last update a couple of months ago in mid-September, um, here in the time of the antitypical sixth trumpet. So perhaps everybody could mute unless they have something to say, since we're getting a lot of background noise. Thank you. So as we've done in our previous updates, I'm going to just focus in on those things that I've been following in the mainstream news media that have been happening at this point over the past maybe 7 weeks now since our last update, and we'll see that there's a lot that's been happening. That prophetic developments are truly accelerating at a rapid pace, and so much has been happening that I thought I might wait a little bit longer initially before I did another such update, but there's just too many. I literally have,
Thank you for honoring my request, brother. I appreciate it.
praise God, I think I have almost close to 500 links just in the past 7 weeks that I think have some significance of what's happening right now. So it's unbelievable what's happening in this world, and so I think it's useful for us to together examine those a little bit together. And these are just news stories. This is not including actually anything from the religious press. This is actually just mostly from the mainstream media. And it also doesn't include anything from like social media or from any videos. I mean, it's just the news itself. And I think when we go through them, you'll see just why I consider these things to be tremendously significant. And again, as we did in our last study, there's so many that it would probably crash my computer to try to open all the tabs to show the actual news stories. And so we're just going to go through the headlines because there's just too much news to even possibly keep track of it all, or try to read into the details of what's been happening. So we'll begin here at the top of, maybe I'll switch to this tab to not have too much business going on the screen. But the first headline I have here: Catholics project many images onto Pope Leo. Some see him as liberal, some see him as conservative, some focus on his American background, others focus on his time in South America, in the global South, and he seems to be almost like a Rorschach test pope so far, that it's kind of difficult to pin him down, and it seems to be in the eye of the beholder the way he seems to be being viewed by people. I think that itself is very interesting. Previous popes seem to have been much more making efforts right away to be seen a certain way, and he so far has not really done that very significantly, other than a couple of little things that we'll see as we go through our study tonight. The next headline here at the top is a bus-sized uncrewed airship being tested by NATO as a maritime surveillance platform. So as if all of the drones and the planes and the spy satellites aren't enough, and all of the online surveillance that they're doing, but now they want to actually start creating airships, like Zeppelins, as it were, that will be just hovering in the air constantly over, especially the cities, to keep constant surveillance upon us, both here in America and in the NATO countries in Europe. So the surveillance grid is really becoming almost all-consuming. Here's another article from military.com that pepper balls, rifle rounds, and drones. The UC police get green light for military-grade weapons. So that's the University of California is actually now the police for the campus police for the University of California system is now adopting military-grade style weapons in order to deal with difficulties and protests that are happening on their campuses. This is a certainly concerning development. Here, the next article on yahoo.com, GOP lawmaker makes blockbuster claim. FBI has at least 20 names of suspected Epstein clients. So the whole scandal around Jeffrey Epstein and the whole not just pedophilia network, but also Jeffrey Epstein was actually a very high-level financial criminal who helped really the rich and powerful, the billionaires of this world, to be able to hide their money in offshore accounts and do other kinds of assorted improper dealings. And he actually has very interesting connections also to many of the surveillance things that are happening in this world. And the scandal around his death and the government's covering up of what happened with that and refusal to release the information is continuing to accelerate. And actually, once this government shutdown is finally over, which it seems to possibly be heading in that direction just this past week and the past few days, there's one more new lawmaker who just won a special election in Arizona recently, who's not yet been sworn in, but as soon as she is sworn in, she apparently will provide the final vote needed to force the government to release some of that information. So that's going to be an interesting development when that happens. The next article from MSN.com about the media's MAGA makeover. So we'll see there's a whole thread throughout many of these articles about how the media is really being influenced very strongly by the Trump administration. And in many ways, I mean, the media in general tends to have a left-leaning political slant. And yet, unlike any time in my memory, they really seem to be caving to the pressure from the Trump administration to limit their criticism of the rather concerning authoritarian developments that are happening in our government. Towards that end, there was a whole scandal back in September where Jimmy Kimmel, the late night talk show host, was fired for a time, suspended under pressure from the Trump administration for his criticism of President Trump. Again, I'm not commenting in any of these stories. I'm not commenting on the substance of any of these articles. I'm not taking sides in the political debate. We're not for the right or for the left. We're just trying to see what's happening and what's trending. And there is this very interesting development where critics of the government are being silenced, whether they're legitimate critics, whether they're illegitimate critics, whether they're just using political satire. You really can't criticize the government very publicly anymore. So here's an article from CNBC, how the head of the FCC, that's the Federal Communications Agency, was misled on Charlie Kirk's killing, that Jimmy Kimmel was misled, supposedly. And Trump has been threatening not only Jimmy Kimmel, but really all of the prominent late night talk show hosts, which seems like a strange target for Trump's criticism, but obviously these are some things that he's interested in and that he's watching and tracking. He so much so that he's actually suggested that the TV licenses of some of these major networks actually be threatened to be pulled if they do not silence certain critics or fire or suspend certain critics. To the point that even many Republicans are actually questioning the developments here in censoring free speech among Americans, which is, again, a very concerning development, uh, regardless of what we think about this particular situation of criticism. Um, well, there's several articles there. I won't go through every single one of them that all touch on this situation. I will note this last one, how Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas, sounds the alarm that suggesting that the FCC chair sounds like a mafia boss in his threats against ABC over Jimmy Kimmel. This is the nature and character of this criticism. It's not just simply saying we don't like what they're saying, but they're actually acting like mafia bosses and insisting that these criticisms cannot continue. The whole developments we began to touch on in our last update on the killing of Charlie Kirk and how horrendous that was, but also the backlash and reaction to that, both in the media and in the political class and in the religious sphere, and how a great seemingly, quote, religious revival has seemed, especially young people, has jumped up and really come um, into prominence in our country. Sorry. In response to Charlie Kirk, and this is a very interesting where many young people are becoming more religious. They're getting back to church, especially to Sunday. We have the whole Charlie Kirk Memorial, where very concerning developments and rhetoric came out during that campaign, during that memorial, as it were. And here, even the military leaders of our government, this is from NBC News, are now considering developing a whole recruiting campaign centered around Charlie Kirk. Very interesting. Here's an article from the New York Times. I thought this was just very kind of interesting in the whole end time Babylon, Tower of Babel antitype, that Apple has now come out with a new pair of AirPods. Those are kind of the wireless earbuds that offer an impressive language translation where in 4 major languages that you can get real-time translation. So if you have these new AirPods in and someone is speaking Spanish, you can almost instantly hear what they're saying in English right in your ears as you're talking to them. And I think they're also doing that for perhaps Portuguese and one other language I can't remember off the top of my head. And they also are planning on expanding this to many other languages pretty soon. So I thought that was just really interesting. Estonia, here's an article from the BBC. Of course, we have all of the war rhetoric and the rhetoric around creating a mindset to be expecting coming World War, particularly World War III, as it were, and the whole war and rumors of war. And there'll be a whole thread throughout many of these articles that touches upon that aspect. And here from the BBC, Estonia condemns brazen airspace violations by Russian warplanes. Again, in all of these articles, especially connected with Russia and Ukraine and the conflict with NATO, We're not, again, taking sides. We're not evaluating the validity. I believe there's a tremendous amount of propaganda on both sides of the news about this conflict, where it's very, very difficult to know exactly what's real and what's not. And I think what's more important is to understand the rhetoric that's being put out to try to guide people's minds in how they're thinking about it. So there's allegations that Russian warplanes are making airspace violations, and also we'll see many articles about drone violations that are supposedly Russian in origin. Of course, we don't really know that for sure, but that's what's being put out there. That's inciting the rhetoric to think that these war escalations are proceeding apace. Here's another article from MSN, Inside the Space Force as it prepares for a new kind of war, and particularly for orbital combat, where they are developing new types of anti-satellite technology, where they're creating even killer satellites, where satellites that will attack other satellites. And this kind of space war that for much of the Cold War, at least, and for the past uh, decades since the end of the Cold War, has largely been held in check, is now really no longer being held in check. And developments are apace on all sides, particularly among the Americans and the Russians and the Chinese, to be able to attack each other's satellite networks, which are a fundamental basis for modern warfare. And if one side can gain an advantage in this realm, then they can have a great advantage should hostilities break out. Here's an article about a prominent journalist, Andrew Ross Sorkin, has written an article or a book here called 1929 about the stock market crash, and showing, this is originally from Bloomberg Press, and talking about the tremendous parallels with today's stock market and how it's appearing to be a bubble that's getting ready to burst. Of course, we are expecting a great economic calamity and crash to come, and the mainstream press seems to be promoting the same idea. The FBI, here's an article from a online kind of alternative press person, Glenn Klippenstein, and he says FBI readies new war on trans people. So for the past, quite a few, many years, there was quite a swing of the pendulum towards the extreme left, where all of this trans rhetoric and LGBTQ and social justice and racial tension and all those ideas were being pushed to extremes. And now there is a tremendous backlash against that. And it was first a backlash among the alternative press, but now that the Trump administration has taken over the government, the levers of government power are now being implemented to